Yeah, so thank you very much for joining us today, this afternoon. This is the last session of our seminar series in social movements and political action, and the last session of the year, at least. We will restart in February. We still have a little bit, we are still discussing a little bit the program of the next year, but we will keep you posted soon. I just want to share with you the page of the seminar. The seminar has been existing for 10 years now. It was created in 2014 by Britta Baumgart and myself. And the first participant actually was our today guest, our dear colleague and friend Marco Allegra was really the first speaker on our seminar in October 2014. So it's very nice to conclude this first 10th anniversary with him. And we have had in the meantime more than 100 sessions on the most different topics. And the goal has always been to crossing different disciplines and way of looking at social movements and resistance and political action beyond what we usually consider forms of participation, political and social participations, and also crossing different epistemologies and looking at different geographical areas of the world, also countries that usually are not really at the center of the attention of the studies on social movements and political non-conventional participation, like Sub-Saharan Africa or China or Lebanon or Pakistan, etc., etc. So we had a very different and large scope. And here you can see some examples of the titles of the seminars we have organized in the last months. For instance, in November we had this seminar on the form, field, and order of anti-extractivist protest in Mozambique, protest political voice, and democracy of marginalized groups. We've also which also focused on Indian movements. Well, you can have a look at our website. Practically all the sessions are recorded, so you can also click on the title and watch the video if you're not able to come and to see and to listen to the seminars in the very day. So today we have Marco Allegra, and thank you very much for joining us and to be here and present your reflection and research on this topic. The title is Between Quiescence and Revolt, Everyday Practices and Collective Action. This aspect of the everyday practices and hidden forms of protest and resistance that are not only let's say the evident and the visible part of what social movements and protest actors do is very interesting, also from the perspective of our seminar. So we have tried to give space to this type of reflections and observations, which is particularly useful, we think, to understand mobilizations and forms of resistance that are not or that are beyond the Western and Northern countries, so especially in Southern and more peripheral countries, semi-peripheral countries, this perspective, these lenses are very useful. So thank you very much, Marco. Just I will introduce you very quickly. Marco studied at the University of Turin and also the School of Oriental and African Studies at the University of London. He's currently a principal investigator at the Institute of Social Sciences of the University of Lisbon and at an associate researcher at ICS-Iscte at the Center for Research and Studies in Sociology. He has worked as lecturer and postdoctoral researcher at the University of Turin, here at ICS-Iscte. He has been visiting researcher at the Department of Political Government at the Ben Gurion University, Bin Shiva, and the Department of Culture, Politics and Society of the University of Turin, and is currently, as I say, a principal investigator here close at the Institute of Social Science of the University of Lisbon, where is PI of the project Logo, which studies the governance of local housing strategies in Portugal. He is also currently dedicating his research and his reflection to the study of affordable housing strategies as a team member of the project DASH, funded by the European Commission in the framework of Marie Curie Staff Exchange Action, and is also, of course, interested in this topic of the housing activism and urban change in Lisbon, informed by the idea of action research and co-production, which I think is a little bit what he's also presenting today. Or at least related to what is presenting today. He has extensive publication in this area in journals, books, and chapters, and so it will be very interesting to listen to you. So I can share your PowerPoint now, and see.
Ciao.
Just a moment. I'm showing you all the things in my computer in this moment, and you, sorry, yeah, okay, because I didn't open the presentation of Marco earlier. So I'm doing now. And, I don't understand this one too. Okay, here. Well, okay. We can just see Antonio there. I don't know why, but you are a protagonist of this PowerPoint. But well, maybe as one of the prominent actors of this field.
Hello and good afternoon. Can you all see the PowerPoint, the slides, full screen? Yeah. Okay, Antonio is saying that this is the case.
Well, I don't know. Well, we can keep like this.
So, thank you for joining us. Let's do it. I have like 30-40 minutes, right? Okay. So can you tell me when I'm like 10 minutes from the end? Okay.
The goal of the seminar is not in a rush.
Okay. The topic here is the less visible elements, if you want, of social and political mobilization as a part of the broader problem of democratic governance. And this is an effort, I would say, of systematization of some basic ideas that underlie most of my research so far, and also so systematization in conceptual and methodological terms, and also the product of an ongoing research project. We started actually with the project Hopes. I had a little role in that project that Buia was leading, and then in a sort of side gig / informal project that I've been carrying out ever since, in collaboration with different people, and it's basically a research on the relation between let's say or it started as a research on the relation between housing activism in Lisbon and the network or the ecosystem of coletividades, as they're called in the local dictionary. That is a no-profit opens social spaces, social centers, if you want, that have cater to a range of different needs of their membership and of the city as a whole, but operates primarily in the area of arts and culture, entertainment, and so on and so forth. And so this is my main empirical anchor for everything that I will say in this presentation. And of course, this is a social movement seminar, and I would very much like to receive comments from a social movements perspective. Okay, I'm not social movement scholars, as most of the research that I have embarked on in my life. Also, this one is the product of a random configuration of things, you know. So it was not planned, but it happened. And so sometimes when I do this, always when I'm doing research on any topic, because also I like to change a bit, I'm missing the basic concept. So I'm very much relying on you to provide that context from a social movement studies perspective. But enough with the preliminary. Or better, you know, let's start with a different set of preliminary consideration. This my very remote, if you want, starting point is that for research on the issue of democratic governance of our societies this is what I think is a basic fact of social life. That is, our life as human beings is social in nature. Okay, there are many arguments that you can make about that. There is an ontological point that I think we should consider, that we do not really exist as individual, as autonomous individuals separated from everyone and everything that is around us. There is a structural point. We live behind every fact of our life. There's usually some form of collective decision-making going on, provide the background, presenting opportunities and constraints for individual action, and so on and so forth. Structures of rules, cost opportunities, and so on and so forth. And there is a contingent historical point, if you want, because if you look at human societies, you know, and in a sort of a world history perspective, well, you cannot avoid the conclusion that our society is especially saturated by policy. Every aspect of our life is basically the realm and the purview of everyone else. Usn't be like that. If we, for example, we compare the role of the state in our or large institutions or in our societies with the society that existed 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, we see that, you know, the public is extremely pervasive, you know, in our society, which inevitably put us into a relationship with others, either as a counterpart, meaning that we negotiate our individual life with others, individuals, groups, institutions, the state, and so on and so forth, and in collaborative terms, because once again we partner up once again with other individuals, groups, institutions, etc., in order to get what we want. Okay, and so to me, the problem of collective action and democratic governance is to be framed against this white background, okay, very elementary background if you want, but as an analytical problem. That is, we want to understand how collective action is a factor in the governance of our society, how the machine works, if you want, and a normative dimension, in the sense that we want to understand how it can work for our goals. Okay, for our collective action, for example, can produce democratic governance. Okay, so a governance that has certain traits and correspond to certain ambitions that we have. And my starting point, my way to frame this is a sort of an Aristotelian argument, in the sense that Aristotle provides us with a sort of how can I call it, frame or caliber, if you want, to measure this relation between collective action and governance. Okay, that is the idea of citizenship in the very primordial notion of it, in the sense that nowadays we tend to conceive citizenship more as a theory of rights for the Greek. For the Greek, it was very much a theory of participation and political agency. It was not so much about rights you can claim, but how effective, what kind of voice do you have in the determination of the collective choices? Okay, citizenship is the participation. For the Greek philosopher, is the participation or the lack of participation to the government of the polis. In a very basic form, if we have to decide whether or not we're going to war with Sparta, or we need to execute Socrates, for example, all the citizens will go up on the hill, discuss a bit, and then vote. Okay. So that's my basic framing. Okay. A frame of citizenship, if we want. So if citizenship is measured as the degree of access to decision-making, to decision-making arenas, if you want, that organize our collective life, what we're talking here, what we're saying really here, is that citizenship is a relation with some form of governance. Okay. And so the problem of democratic governance means studying the problem of democratic governance means investigating the nature and dynamics of collective decision-making. There are two main elements here, in my view. First, the reach of a determined center or arena of decision-making over a given population or a territorial area, for example, which is basically the principle of the consequences of decision-making. Okay, so for example, a great theorist of democracy, Robert Dahl, says something that like the quote that I pasted here, no? So that every adult because it discusses, anyway, let's keep it. Everyone that is subject to a government and its laws must be presumed to be qualified as, and has an unqualified right to be, a member of the demos, a citizen. Okay. Sometimes we hear every 4 years, I would say, we hear the joke that we should all be allowed to vote in the U.S. presidential election. Why? Because what the president of the United States decides, that center of decision making, has important consequences for our own life. Okay, because somehow we're all American subjects, if you want. So we should have some degree of influence, theoretically, following Robert Dahl, at least. So first, the first element is the reach of a certain decision-making process. The second element is the most Aristotelian element, the most explicit Aristotelian element, that is the degree in which individuals and groups can influence the process of decision-making, okay? So the determination of collective choices. And this is a principle of participation or inclusion, okay? So these are two basic principle that regulates or give form, if you want, to this idea of citizenship. To give an example of this logic in terms of constitutional architecture, what is apartheid, for example? Apartheid is a system in which some sectors of the population are governed by the state. They feel the consequences of that decision-making process, but have no influence over it because they cannot participate. As a Black person, for example, in apartheid South Africa, I could not participate to the determination of collective choices, for example, through voting, or to be even more subtler, to vote through voting for a meaningful source of authority, okay, not for some kind of bullshit, fake form of local government, okay? However, there is a second important element. Making influential decisions that have an impact on our society, on our individual life, is not an exclusive prerogative of what we usually call the decision makers, okay? For example, elected or non-elected members of the elite, politicians, opinion leaders, technocrats, rich individuals, and so on and so forth. And it's not even the exclusive prerogative of powerful or the most powerful societal institution like the state. Okay, it's not like all the decision-making powers are, you know, for the elite, for the decision makers, or for the state, okay? And I would also add that it's not exclusively a matter of explicit norms and standards. I mean, decision-making, it's not exclusively formal, planned, certified, and so on and so forth. We know things are more complex than that. And I'll give you just an example. Think about traffic, about car traffic, I mean, you know, the streets. From a functional point of view, traffic is, I would say, an urban infrastructure. It's the exact functional equivalent of a road or a bridge or a wall that actually physically exists in the city. Just like a bridge or a street, traffic eases movement, facilitates movement to the city, or make it more difficult, okay? People as infrastructure, Abdul Malik Simone would call it, for example. What is the difference between the bridge, the 25th of April bridge and traffic, road traffic? The bridge on the Tejo is something that is designed from the start to be a bridge, okay? And it's something that is built following a template for a purpose, and it's done deliberately, and it's approved by the local planning commission, okay? Even more than that, the bridge is it's a big thing. So traffic, it's different. It has the same effects, if you want, but it comes from a totally different origin. It comes from the sum of many single actions, okay? Well, the actions of all the people that, you know, get out of their houses, homes, and suddenly they are the traffic, okay? The fact is, of all these, of these thousands, literally thousands of single actions, autonomous actions, none of them is meant to create traffic. Creating traffic is not the purpose. I want to go to work. I want to go to school. I want to meet friends. But if we sum all these actions, then we have traffic. Okay, and And it's even fairly predictable as a phenomenon, if you think about that, because we all know that if we want to go by car to Almada and it's, I don't know, 11:30 in the morning, well, it's 20 minutes. If it's 6:30 in the afternoon, it's an hour, okay? We all know that. So it really works like an infrastructure in this respect. So what's the point here? The point is that the sum of this small autonomous action can have the same net effect on the city of planned and formally sanctioned policies. Okay, who decides on the city? The mayor, because the mayor builds a bridge. Okay, but also all of us who get up in the morning to live our own life and we produce traffic. Okay. So based on these premises, what I'm really trying to do here is to keep these two perspectives together in a study of the relation between collective action and urban governance. It's urban because I like cities. I'm a city boy, but it's just an objective, I think, or something that should be more investigative. How much of what I'm saying is strictly urban, but let's keep it for the next time. So my case study is the relation between what is this different dimension in relation to the politics of housing in the city of Lisbon, for example, and even more specifically, the relation between an understanding of politics that is explicit, that is based on claims, etc., an understanding of politics that is less visible, more informal, and so on and so forth. Or no, I think I wrote it better in the slides. So my case is specifically, the ordinary and contentious politics in social movements, housing social movements. It's studied like that. Now it's a bit broader, at least, as I would like to develop in the future. But anyway, we will come back to what ordinary and contentious politics exactly means. But that it's a case study in this. Investigate broader approach to relation between collective action and collective decision making and governance. Okay, so in order to embark in an investigation like that, we need three things: a theory of governance, a theory of collective action, and a methodology. Especially we need to adapt these theories in a way that they allow us to see what is really less visible, okay? Because some parts of collective action are very visible, so everybody knows that the mayor gets elected on that day and you can count the votes, and he's the mayor, so he gets to have that strip, the mayor belt or whatever, and so on and so forth. Some dynamics of collective action are much less visible. So, but apart from that, we need a theory of governance. That's the first point, how the dynamic of collective decision-making works. And here we can rely on the idea, or at least I do rely on the idea of decentralized governance, as opposed to positivistic governance. You see the idea of decentralized governance expressed in the quotes by Griggs, Wagner, and Norvell, up in the left upper corner of the slides. Positivistic governance focuses on decision-making as expressed or depending on laws, contracts, explicit rules and standards, okay, from voting to laws to, I don't know, formal partnership for the governance or this or that sector, and so on and so forth. Decentralized governance is broader because all these things, you know, law, contracts, rules and standards, etc., are included as factors in the governance of a city, but there's more, because the idea of decentralized governance also includes in the picture informal arrangements and standards, omissions or non-implementation of rules, for example, and so forth. And the basic idea is that decision-making emerges from the relation of a much larger number of actors. As I said, not only the mayor governs the city. You know, a lot of people actually govern the city, and it does so in many different ways. Yes, by writing rules down, okay, but also acting according to rules that are not written down anywhere, okay, or simply ignoring the rules, for example. Second point, we do need a theory of collective action, okay, of a theory of how people get together to achieve some common goal, okay? And of course, we do have theories of collective action, which, however, for the most part, I will go back to that in the next slide. They tend to overlook the issue of they tend to overlook the issue of traffic, so to speak. So the idea that collective action is not necessarily the product of goal-oriented strategies and formal channels. And so here my research explores the idea of everyday politics as a necessary counterpart of contentious politics. The idea represents also a sort of sympathetic criticism to what I see as mainstream theorizations in the field of social movement studies or citizenship studies. Okay, so second point, the theory of collective action that includes, you know, traffic in Abdul Malik Simon's sense, people as a fundamental infrastructure of a city or society in general. And third element that we need, a methodological proposal. My take on theory, to be very short, explaining this is a bit besides the point, I think. But I fundamentally subscribe to the idea that theory is a toolbox. It's an instrument for empirical research, rather than the crown jewel and the ultimate goal of the production of knowledge. Okay, and Manuel Castells used to say that we need theorized histories of social phenomenon and not transhistorical theories of social phenomenon. And for what it's worth, I agree with the guy. It will be even more difficult to explain here, but in terms of methodological guidance, I rely very much on, as a general idea, on what is called practice theory. That is a methodology that is attentive, you know, to all these ordinary things, rituals, routine, daily routines, what we do with the body, etc., etc. But I would not enter that because it would be a bit difficult to develop that point here. But practice theory emphasizes, you know, for me at least, daily routines and most immediate social needs. You know, it's if you remember Bourdieu's definition of practice, practice is something that somehow through repetition, it's something that creates the rules that regulate situations where there are no rules, in the sense of explicit rules. Okay, so now, as I said, we are in a social movement studies seminar series here. So in the last part of the talk, I say something about how this approach completes or complements the existing theories of collective action. So the first big issue is that of repertoires of mobilization. And here the main reference is the idea of contentious politics in social movement studies. And if you want to refer, to the realm of citizenship studies, the idea by easing of acts of citizenship. And somehow these two concepts or approaches focus on how, as Mitlin says here in the quote, active citizens engage publicly with political change. The Mitlin's quote is about Sidney Tarrow, specifically. And these citizens, these active citizens, do that by making claims on the authorities that are based on what they perceive are their rights, and that are embodied in gestures that are, and this is an important point, extraordinary with respect to their daily life. Because in daily life, not even an activist protests every day or sign petitions every day or burn cars every day or whatever. Okay, we do that. We do our shopping, we work, we take care of our families, and so on and so forth and so forth. And then we protest from time to time. Okay, we sign a petition, we vote. Okay, so all these are actions that are extraordinary with respect to our daily routines, even for our core activists, I would say. Ordinary politics instead is made of ordinary activities and routine. Once again, like going to school, going to work, trying to provide for your family, fixing what needs to be fixed, and so on and so forth. And these activities and routines are not directed toward the authorities. They're not claims that we present to the mayor of Lisbon or the president of the Republic. They're not directly towards the goal of achieving political change, but focus very much on the satisfaction of basic daily needs, because we need a lot of things in our life. We need, we need to eat, we need a little money, we need to do some shopping, we need to have fun from time to time, to do some sports, for example, to organize our life in certain ways. Okay, so ordinary politics, everyday politics is directed toward the satisfaction of those needs. Okay, and I think I'm list here some theorization of this idea in the literature, for example, by Asef Bayat, through the idea of quiet encroachment, by Scott, Neveu, and so on and so forth. I wouldn't go into that specifically. I'd rather save time for the debate after that. But for example, to give you an example about my research, okay, I said my research observed, if you want, the activist housing organization like Habita, Stop Despejos. I'm certain that someone here knows what I'm talking about, on the one side, and on the coletividades, like in Lisbon, CIES-Iscte, Zona Franca, RDA, Desgraça, this kind of social spaces, okay? And somehow, for example, CIES-Iscte and Habita represent two ideal types in this respect, because Habita is an activist organization, so is theme specific. It's about housing politics, It has interlocutors in the public authorities. The Abita wants to be heard by the mayor, by the vereador da habitação, by whoever, the president of the republic or the prime minister, etc., etc. And the members, a very easy way to me to differentiate between the two versions of between contentious and activist and everyday politics is to think in terms of time allocation. 90% of the time that Abita activists spend in Abita is directed towards those extraordinary deeds that are required for an activist to get to the prime minister and be heard, or to make a revolution or whatever. Okay. In Sirigaita, Sirigaita is quite different from this point of view, because it's multi-issue, and the very primary and single issue, if you want, is the space and keeping the space open. And 90% of the time that people in Sirigaita dedicate to their collective project is spent sweeping the floor or washing the dishes, ensuring that there is some band playing on Thursday, so that the space stays open, and we can basically do what we want with the space. Okay, it's also a matter of personal satisfaction, those basic needs. Okay. So I think that considering the relation between the two, and I want to be clear, I'm not arguing that, everyday politics is a substitute for contentious politics. I'm arguing that we can understand much better the dynamic of collective mobilization if we keep an eye on the two. Somehow, no? The advantage of keeping an eye on the two things, to me, it's a bit rethinking what is political, and especially rethinking what is sometimes a dichotomic understanding of political agency, that is collective versus individual, organized versus informal, planned and spontaneous, active and passive, and so on and so forth. Very important, disruptive versus conforming. That's also an important distinction that somehow it's overvalued, I think. The second element, the second topic, the second issue that is relevant, I think, for a seminar on social movement studies, that is the issue of political change. Because traditionally, we tend to focus on two elements. That is, we on one side, on certain instances of political change, the big P politics, elections, regime change, revolutions, and so on and so forth. On the other side, we tend to focus on the usual suspect of political change. Okay. Parties, unions, activists, members of the elite, Donald Trump and Elon Musk, and so on and so forth. And there are several reasons for that, I think. First, it's because I think that the ordinary is much less visible for the reasons that we discussed. No, it's easy to understand who won the elections. Okay. It's much more difficult to map, collective action, that is much more scattered, dispersed over urban territory, over multiple issues that do not conform to certain standards in terms of repertoires and so on and so forth. So the ordinary is less visible and requires a sort of methodological attention, if you want, to get there. While other, of course, elements that usually belong to contentious politics or to representative politics, which would be a third mode, are more visible. Okay, you can count demonstrations. Okay, that's something that social movement scholars obviously do. The second point is that we tend to think about governance, as I said, still in positivistic terms. Okay, so what really matters is, you know, party politics and the referendum and whatever, no? And so we don't notice the traffic, okay, somehow. We don't notice, or as the guy said, we are so immersed into the water as fishes that we don't even know that waters exist, because there will be we need to be specifically focused to understand that. Also, there is a sort of resistance fallacy, I would call it, in the sense that what is not organized, what is not active or activist, what do not proclaim the breaking from the mandated norm, it's sometimes, you know, conceived like a minor or residual form of collective action. Okay, so think about the things that Marx said about the Lumpenproletariat, for example. Now they don't have the right identity because it's not the right class. They don't have the right repertoire. They're really suspicious. Probably they will side with the bourgeoisie if when that thing hits the fan, and so it's not a revolutionary subject from this point. Or, for example, think about the relative disdain that is through which, you know, certain resistance struggles or passive struggles are looked upon. Okay, well, it's just resisting. It's not revolutionary. It's just resisting, having a very narrow agenda, being on the retreat, and so on and so forth. So there is a sort of prejudice. My proposal is to focus instead on the political impact of ordinary practices. It might be difficult to capture their value, but it's a force to be reckoned with. Okay, and the literature offers examples, like, for example, the idea of insurgent citizenship by James Alston is the concept that actually describes how a process that has started from instances of ordinary politics, everyday politics, routines. People were not interested in politics with the big P, but were a lot of interested in a small p politics of like keeping the house, okay, keeping their own house. This escalated and become the backbone of the constitutional reform and transition to democracy in Brazil during the 80s, okay? Bayat has argued that a lot was going on in certain Middle Eastern countries in the 2000s when nobody was actually thinking that something was going on. Why? Because if you look at Egypt, if you look at Iran, you look at whatever, you don't see the usual suspect. You don't see the parties. You don't see the unions. You don't see the vibrant civil society and so on and so forth. Because for different reason, it's not the least important that these are authoritarian regimes. So, you know, the space for party action is of course compressed, but that didn't mean, in Bayat's argument, that nothing was happening, that people were just one by one, just waiting it out and doing nothing together to change things for them and to advance with their own life. Bayat's book is from 2010. You know what happened in 2011, the Arab Spring, and so on and so forth. And that is something that gives food for thought. Or the Sumud in Palestine. Sumud means, you know, that simply by staying there, not giving up on the land, you are able to produce political results, and so on and so forth. More modestly, my research try to understand how, for example, the ecosystem of the collectividades, with their emphasis on, you know, concerts and food and arts and culture and etc., represented an ecosystem of that provided useful resources, material and immaterial, to activist movement, for example, to Habitat specifically. So this relation. And the advantage of this approach is, I think, that it helps us to understand the up and downs of mobilization. The fact that mobilization proceeds in cycle, this is something that social movement studies they know very well, but observing ordinary everyday politics gives you perhaps a better idea of what happens in the phases when mobilization, the open mobilization, the visible mobilization is low or residual, and so on and so forth. And explain to a certain extent also the unpredictability of revolution. Why nobody was able to tell that the Arab Spring was exploding, or the Intifada during the 80s, or whatever revolution. Nobody knows before. Okay, why? Maybe because we're trying to count things that cannot be counted somehow. Anyway, conclusion. Well, the results should be expanding the realm of politics, not the real of politics. But that's a typo. That's just a typo. So, but anyway, that would be a result, apart from the typo, in the sense that the idea is that there is no authentic or exclusive field in which citizenship practices should be deployed. It's not that it's political to protest, and it's not political to wipe the floor, to clean the floor, for example. We should really think the political in a broader term. Okay, so that would be the best possible result, if you want, in general terms, of this kind of investigation. The second element is a caveat. We should not romanticize. I mean, first, because it's not like if we discover that everyday politics exists, then this opens up for us, you know, an highway to social and political change, because finally we can master the trick. It's not like that. It's not magic. And also, we should not romanticize in the sense that, exactly like activist policy, as contentious politics, if you want, everyday politics should produce bad or good results, stuff that we like and stuff we do not like. For example, you know, everyday liberalism, everyday neoliberalism, if you know Miroski, it's a phenomenon that, you know, sort of consolidates, you know, the prevalent ruthless market approach that we follow in our society, based on the fact that everybody is actively sustaining that through practices in their ordinary lives. Okay, you don't need to be a ruthless capitalist or to, as Miroski said, to have read Milton Friedman to be part of the system. You're part of the system because what you do every day. And the same goes with the Nixon silent majorities that they thought, and to some extent, it was not a mistake that they thought that they could quell, for example, the resistance to the Vietnam War or the banality of colonization. I think that the big misunderstanding about what goes on in Israel-Palestine, in terms of, maybe we're past that point now, but, you know, let's say a couple of years ago, that used to be a big misunderstanding for me. And today you hear that, you know, that colonization is done by the activists, by the fanatics, the messianic, and so on and so forth. No, colonization is done by people that actually would like to pay less for their mortgage. Okay, so part family budget. Third element of conclusion, all of this as a methodological goal that, you know, transcend, you know, the topic of the research, which is what is known as learning from the South. Okay, and it's also a sort of a caveat, in the sense that I see sometimes the idea of learning from the South, which is basically the idea that social theory, in my case, urban theory, has been by and large produced by always the same center of cultural production, you know, and from the same cases, okay? So lots of urban studies scholars from the best British universities, they will explain the urban world to you based on the fact that they have observed Manchester and Liverpool and London, or a bunch of global cities like Los Angeles, Tokyo, Paris, etc., etc. So the idea of learning from the South is a reaction to that, okay? And but sometimes I think it's voiced or implemented in a very wrong way. I could elaborate, but let's go for wrong. That is, we need a Southern theory to understand the South. I don't think this is the case. I think it's the regional Western, Northwestern theory was better from this point of view, because at least it had the ambition of understanding everything, okay? I don't think that we need local theories to study local stuff. We need, of course, a methodology and a set of methods that is tailor-made for our own investigation, yes. But in terms of concept theories, etc., I'm very much side on the other version of learnings from the South, which is Jennifer Robinson's, for example, Sociology and Urban Scale, that says, well, every field, north, south, east, west, left, and right, is potentially fertile for theoretical production. Okay, you can create theory from the observation of whatever situation, social situation in everywhere. Okay, and you can apply that everywhere else. Okay. So I don't think that Marxism should be discarded because it's a theory born in Germany, for example, and so it described well what goes on in Germany, but not in Italy, not in Sri Lanka, not in Canada, etc., etc. You can do that. At the same time, that's what I'm trying to do with this research, because if you were attentive to the list of authors quoted, sometimes I think the main influence, or in large part the influences, the theoretical influence that are included in my perspective are born out of the observation of what is called very wrongly the global South. And I think it makes perfect sense to apply, I don't know, the concepts of created by Asef Bayat about Cairo, or James Alston about Sao Paulo in Lisbon. There is no issue here of North and South. These are all boxes that we would probably that we should rather avoid, I think, from this point of view. And I think that's it.
Yeah, just want to turn the. Can I close?
That were you.
And I think I also want to do this, to put the camera on the room, so that is
yes.
And maybe we now collect questions and comments. I already have something, but maybe there is someone else.
Which?
No, I just I wrote down. Yeah. Who's managing this?
Exactly, that's what I was wondering. It's Guya or it's me?
Okay, look, you will have to start? Okay, so I actually I'm just have I cannot resist to do some comments. First of all, I'm very happy that you're taking this direction in your approach to social movements analysis and to your fieldwork. And so the social movements is a kind of a label that we use, but of course we mean many other things that are not really just the usual actors or processes that are associated with social movement. And I think it's very helpful because many scholars that are they address mobilization, activists, protests, etc. Not in the social movement field. That is not a restricted field. That is clothing itself is a broad field, a very varied, etc. But many scholars that are not very familiar with this field, they reproduce some bias that were overtaken like 20, 30 years ago, 40 years ago in the social movement scholarship. And also they use many times concepts as repertoire of mobilization, contentious politics, or resource mobilization. There are also concepts that also inside the social movement theory has been challenged a lot deeply, particularly in the context of the so-called cultural term in social movement studies. So my only advice for you is that when you say the usually speaking, traditionally, we associate the change, the actor of the change with these specific actors, or we traditionally theory address visible protests and visible contentious action or institutional politics. Actually, these things that you are addressing in this presentation that I think here is really amazing to do this, and particularly in the case of Lisbon, being at the center of reflection of social movement theory for 20, 30 years now. And like all the conceptualization about the interactionist perspective of Jasper and Godwin that is based really in a critique of the contentious politics model, and also really focusing on the micro interactions that in their view are where the process of collective building and identity collective creation is developed. So the micro interaction among the different actors. So it's not the big event or I can think about the work about the democracy in the making, like how the dilemmas about what is inclusiveness inside the groups. So all the group theory, observation of group organization, what happened inside the groups at the micro level. Daily interactions, and these things have been have been really at the center of interest of the literature in many years. And there are a lot of interesting studies about that, since also the theory of Melucci about visibility and latency, of Berta Taylor about the idea of Abian structure, that this is the structure the social movements have. And any social phenomena has this Abian structure that exists also when it seems that nothing happens. So also I think the work by Montserrat that you know about the dead moments, like what happened to what the activists they do when there are dead moments. They have fun, and these moments are really essential to consolidate solidarities, emotions, cultural identity. And so in a certain way, we see these moments much more important than the point of the iceberg of the protest in itself to create the identity of the movement. In a certain way, there is a kind of growing consensus around this point. I think also about the work of Parakuki and other Greek scholars about social movements as infrastructure that guarantee social cohesion and social reproduction when the state fails. In moments of crisis. And so my only suggestion is like to kind of not giving as assumed that there is a certain perspective in social movement studies and scholarship, which I call social movement scholarship in a broad way, in a sense, people that are reflecting on these things. There is a knowledge of all the topics that you are mentioning here. So when you say it's assumed like this or traditionally, and also about the outcomes, so like we are really much far from the idea that we look at the outcome of social mobilization in regime change or revolutions or all these things, like particularly in the interactionist perspective, things are really looked at a very micro dimension. I think the most interesting part is really how to connect this to the governance. And I think this is the aspect that I really like in your presentation, and I think that this can be very innovative to connect this to the governance. And I think this I would like to see your work in some months about this, because it's the part that I think is more challenging. Sorry if I took long, but I couldn't resist to give this because I was really interested in this approach. maybe you?
Yeah. No, I have a quite different comment from a very different perspective. Well, as Marco also know, these are questions that I really debate in my doctoral thesis. I don't want to take also too much time, but maybe just a little bit to give the context. So my thesis was on council housing occupations in Lisbon. And I was focusing right on that, or trying to explore this tension between political, explicitly politicized action and this everyday fragmented actions or acts that are more directed towards, in this case, securing housing. But then what is the political impact of it? And the path I took was, well, I'm an anthropologist, so it was more like kind of a thick description of different kind of processes and actors involved, how these diverse processes of contention and mobilization and also quiet encroachment, and trying to capture these like small elements that were going on. And so this leads me to the question, because as you also mentioned, Marco, these theories, for example, of Holston's insurgent citizenship, they have been often criticized for being romantic, sort of like seeing impact and a lot of seeing almost revolution in these tiny acts, whose impact then in the end is often debatable. You know, are they really able to make a difference? No? And as you were saying, you would focus explicitly on the political impact of these ordinary acts. So then I was wondering, like, how do you, well, first of all, what kind of methodologies are you planning to use? How are you then able to like discern these the change that these practices are able to use to produce? Like how can you see if they are fragmented acts and working in many different directions? How can you see then what is the relationship between these acts and their results? And then I was wondering, like, if also what is political impact to you? No? What does it mean? How do you define it? And could you also like apply, for example, ecofeminist perspectives, like focus on, because when you were describing Sirigaita, it was it brought to my mind these descriptions of how for example, so-called reproduction feminists, how they explain how the world is maintained and kept and cared, no? So is this also a direction you might be considering, or?
Listening in the chat, maybe. Maybe you can take it. I can come here close to you and look at the chat. Okay, so maybe you want to I just saw this. Okay, Elena. Do you want we collect one more question and after you answer, or is already enough for you?
Yeah, sure.
Nothing is enough for you.
Exactly.
You can face any kind of challenge. So thank you for the interesting presentation. I have a question. Do you have a perspective regarding the impact of neoliberalism and collective action, more specifically as related that of the far right? Throughout history, it appears that increased neoliberalism has resulted in an increase in far right populism. Well, okay. Good luck. Well, also fascists have everyday practices.
Well, why not? Well, thanks, Guido, for the comments. I will ask you for references specifically. About Sila's comments on the impact. Well, I think that generally speaking, the impact is one of the most elusive concepts in politics, in a sense. What really has an impact? I don't think this is I mean, it's a problem that cuts across all possible forms of mobilization, possible forms of access to decision making, and so on and so forth. I think that it's difficult to give a general answer that is not well. Sometimes you might say that you have an impact. Sometimes you don't, because if an activist, I don't know, how can you measure, for example, the impact of Habitat in the general trajectory of housing politics in the last 15 years of Lisbon? It's a very complicated question. And if you ask the question to different person, they will give you very different answer. You know, sometimes some people will include some people from a bit, of course, will tell you, well, we really did something when we did, I don't know, when we brought the UN special rapporteur for housing rights. This created something in the public debate, and I don't know, Luis Mendes is convinced that it was the master class on gentrification in 2016 by Renovar Murari, etc., that was a turning point. Some people will just tell you, well, there's no influence at all, because the real impact is, I don't know, in the city hall. And you think that you had an impact just because that was your side, you know. And,
but the two things have the same cause.
Yeah, so it's very difficult to. It's from the epistemological point of view. How do you measure it? Do you know? It's very, very difficult. It's very, very difficult. I would say that there are other ways, maybe less ambitious way or more tentative ways to discuss impact. For example, in terms of the issues, okay, there are. If I think, for example, about the communities of the people that refer to those coletividades in Lisbon. Okay, City Gaita. There are maybe 15 in the very central part of the city that I would call it coletividades. Okay. Well, these places, you know, and the people who manage them, they do take care of issues that are important for the community. That their existence do have an impact for at least for the community that is directly involved, which is slightly larger communities than just the militants, if you want to call it like that. I think that part of this community is the activists themselves. Okay, so I think that for Habitat, for example, it made a lot of difference that during these years the Sirigaita existed somehow, I think, and so you can say that Sirigaita had an impact on Habitat. Also, the reverse is true. But if you argue that that Habitat somehow managed to impact the discourse on housing politics in the city in the last 15 years, well, even Sirigaita was somehow influenced in that, you know. And we know that, take the campaign for the referendum, for example. If you look at the calendar of the referendum campaign, you will see that, you know, half of the stops, the events that they did in the last couple of years, they were in spaces like Sirigaita, okay, or in Sirigaita, or maybe in Rizoma or other collectividades. So, for example, one big impact that these places have today in Lisbon is that they provide space, which is an increasingly scarce commodity here in Lisbon, to all for a community, which the activists are also part of. And I think also that in terms of the and I'm going a little bit back to the example of traffic, which is extremely impactful in our daily life, right? I think that it's almost, I would say, it's almost a matter of fact, if you think that the literature, even the literature on gentrification, for example, that some kind of cultural, artistic, social, and even political enterprise, they do have an impact on the trajectory of urban change. What is gentrification? It's never of gentrification to make a joke of gentrification, but it's pretty accurate if you refer to the original notion, is that in a neighbor that it was like this, a new population arrives that brings some cultural activities and whatever, open spaces of a different kind, etc., and the neighbor, which used to be like this, is suddenly like that. Now, I don't want to. I just picked the case of gentrification because it's pretty evident and straightforward, but on a broader scale and less linked to gentrification, I think that there are limitations, in referring, for example, the experience of City Guide and other places like that, just to gentrification alone. But apart from that, if you look at the trajectory of the city of Lisbon and how it changed, it becoming much more cosmopolitan. Okay, part of it was maybe Airbnb. Okay, a big technological platform managed by capitalists, but part of it, it was also the fact that the people changed the city, really changed the face of the city. It's if Lisbon is more cosmopolitan, it's also because people from different countries, and we have a sample here around the table, came here to Lisbon and make Lisbon their own city. They adapted the city to their own needs. So I
think Luisa also, you want to finish?
Yes. No, there was the
fact about the daily practices of now the impact of the right.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think that the issue of practice and this field of exploration is not even limited to activist movements. I mean, this is to social movement and to the relation between, for example, colectividades and an activist collective. Okay, it's broader than that. One of the things, one of the reasons why we have huge problems in our current Western European society of representation, because we don't have parties and unions, for example, that would represent us like it did 40 years ago, 50 years ago. Okay, it's precisely because the parties and the unions have renounced to their everyday politics. I mean, parties in Italy, the Communist Party or the socialist unions in Italy. So, and we're talking about a history that started, 150 years ago, and this history is also made of, of the function and of the resources that an existing party or a union would provide to their members for daily life, because you would go to the Casa del Popolo, to the people's home, to give a rough translation. That is that the headquarters of your union, socialist union, also to drink some wine in the evening, okay, or to engage in any sort of social activities. The collectividades existed in Lisbon 150 years ago, and they were mainly, the product of, unions, association of workers, parties, etc., because back in the days, the parties knew very well that, the political life of citizens is not complete if you just ask them to vote for you once every 4 years. That you have to give them culture, entertainment, food and drinks, and all this stuff that got lost when the parties were slimming, we're getting lighter and lighter and lighter to become basically, electoral cartels, or, a sort of dialogue between members of the elite, that instead of writing letters to one another, they found parties and they discussed through editorials on newspapers. So this environment is completely severed by actual life. So I don't think I'm actually answering the question about right-wing parties, except in this very general way that every political force, that every political subject that wants to be a force that the society needs to consider, it will have to use the two levers somehow, okay? And to give a metaphor, it's a quote by Lefebvre that I really like. He says that, that Lefebvre has this idea that space is produced along 3 different dimensions, okay? But the idea of Lefebvre is that space is produced. It's a social construction. And somewhere he says something like this: every political project that do not build its own space, it's destined to extinction and to become just folklore or something like this. And so I think it's the same. I mean, if you want to achieve change and have an impact, you have to be active in many different aspects of the life of your constituency and the society at large.
To produce the traffic?
Yes, definitely. On specific days.
Or you need to take advantage of the traffic?
Yeah, I mean, this is an academic reflection, so it's not supposed to provide answers, but better questions. So
but it also have to do with if this is a dynamic that is top down or bottom up, like.
I will be always for the bottom up side, but I do not exclude the top down. I would like to get there someday.
I give okay, Luisa.
Hi, thank you, Marco, for your presentation. I was also going to address a question related to your main question, that is the political impact of this ordinary politics, everyday politics. About methodology, mostly I was thinking, I did my PhD research focused on sociocultural spaces in Rome and Berlin, mostly, and trying to understand how institutions, if and how institutions would recognize the existence and the value of those spaces, specifically analyzing the cities of Rome and Berlin. And I can recall many similarities between, for example, the case of City Gaeta and some of those spaces. And I think that what makes a little bit complicated maybe the development of coherent methodology is the time frame, considering the fact that these cases in Lisbon are maybe quite young, and normally the political impact is something that is easier to evaluate on a long-term time frame lapse. So I wanted to ask you if you consider to make any comparison with other cases in other cities that maybe have a longer history, also to see if there are similarities or differences in this sense, also maybe would help to address the political impact. And in this sense, I think the interesting part of this, although I agree with you, it's always complicated to measure the political impact. For example, one element could be the recognition of a value that these places are providing to the city from the institution's point of view. So, and this happens, for example, through the allocation of public spaces to these places in the moment in which they are, in which they lose their first place. Sorry, just a second, sorry.
What?
Something happened.
Like a fit there.
Emergency.
Yes.
I'm very sorry, I'm the only person with the keys. And sorry.
Also everyday practices.
Yes.
Sometimes this happens.
You should not romanticize with that, you know. Daily life gets in the way.
Okay, sorry for making you lose time. Okay, I was finishing. By the way, I was just mentioning, and maybe that could help for the research. So, for example, measure the capability to get the allocation of public spaces, or to have an official recognition in participation of governance system with subsidiarity with the state, for example, in strategies of urban regeneration, or providing sociocultural services to the area, or alternative housing solution of management, or co-management or self-management of public spaces. Cases like this, I think that could also measure a form of impact on institutions, at least through their own recognition. And I think through their recognition, they also kind of demonstrate an impact on general governance politics on the city. So, well, it was a question and it was a suggestion, maybe a tip for the research itself. Thank you.
Anyone else? No?
No, I don't think so.
No question in the
No,
chat?
I think that is somebody left. Yeah, Elizabeth, she left.
Well, well, whether or not I'm considering a comparative perspective, yes and no. I don't think I still have to make up my mind after, you know, just 20 years of career of what are the real benefits of comparative analysis somehow, because no, I mean, it's, to me at least, it's important. Comparative analysis, it's important as a collection of different cases. Yes. Then, whether or not you can make inferences based on the fact that, as always, two different things will be similar for an X number of reasons and will be different for an epsilon number of reasons. Well, this really mess a bit with my mind. I don't have a solution. I would like, yes, to do comparative research, but in terms of accumulation of cases, accumulation of knowledge on specific cases. That is my principle. I'm skeptical about theory building in general, as it is, you know, in the more positivist definition of it. I know that, you know, we progress from the real hardcore positivism, but still, I sometimes think that we are.
But I agree with you. I agree with
about the how to measure the impact. I'm not sure I agree with the criterion that you're suggesting. First of all, because well, I think that impact is very elusive, and I doubt that there is a way to not to show it, but to demonstrate and measure impact. Okay, so it's a difficult problem. I think that, you know, the success of social movements or of a space like CIES-Iscte in getting, you know, like an official stand by public authorities on their space measures more the willingness to the public authorities to do that, rather than the impact that CIES-Iscte has, because you know, from this point of view, I think it's more of a matter of how the powers that be see the city and their role in it. By the way, the city of Lisbon is doing that. You know, the Largo de Residências has a very nice new headquarter. Are they more impactful than Sirigaita or Desgraça, who's buying when they're buying the building? I don't know. I think that it's difficult to connect these pieces and anyway, it's more of an evaluation of the attitude of in this case the CTO rather than an evaluation of the work of the coletividades. I think that it's probably fair to say that with respect not with respect to Sirigaita per se, not even the more political coletividades, but with respect to the idea of to the notion of culture, entertainment, art in the city, most of the times the attitude of the municipality is that serving is this art, entertainment, culture, etc. They are serving other purposes, our purposes or not. That is, if I am financing, you know, the participation to the Santos Populares by the different coletividades, it's because I like the Santos Populares, because I like culture and arts, etc., or because giving money around. It's a matter of keeping the clientele and bringing people to vote, etc. If I'm financing, I don't know, non-profit association in like the Camera did, for example, 15 years ago in the era of Intendente Anjos Mudaria. Am I doing that because I really care about the population? And I think that the non-profit association and collectividades can build a better city for the population, or whatever it is, old and new, etc. Or because I see them as a vehicle of rehabilitation, urban renewal, etc., that will a lever to start a process that will eventually bring, the urban fabric to produce more money. I tend to see the things like this because now that, for example, now that the Largo de Intendente and Muraria and Anjos are producing money, well, you see, I would say, less partnership from the Camera with non-profit association than 15 years ago, probably, because mission accomplished now. So
Marco, if you don't mind, I would like to add something to your last reflection, because I think it's important that also about this point of the outcomes of social movements, there is a long tradition of study. So I think it's also important also that we are aware of this, and there are diversification, specification, which kind of outcomes, dividing between outcome and consequences, which are two different things. And I think that this is also what you're mentioning here, and also the fact that some are considered unintended consequences, other intended consequences. Is very difficult also to address the point of the outcomes, because we should suppose that there is a unique, a common and very unified goal, which is not always the case. Goals and always identities are always fragmented. And also, so the fact of the outcomes is very much studied, and it's very controversial, which doesn't mean that we cannot study. There are specific methodologies to study of this. We have a scholar like Marco Giugni that all his life he studied, he analyzed how to address or not, and which are the limitations of addressing social movements outcomes, and he has an extensive work about that. Other scholars like Catherine Huba or Lorenzo Bozzi. There are other perspectives like the one of James Jasper, that is an interactionist, so always has much more than a perspective that's closer to yours and also to mine. and it talks about gains and losses and rethinking movement outcomes. So you see that action of social movements more in terms of small gains and losses exactly in everyday interactions, which is something more close to what I think is interesting. But it's just to say that also is interesting to see, to look at this word, to have the instrument and the tools to analyze these things, because sometimes we think that social movements, since they are visible, we don't need a specific tool to analyze them, but there are, and I think it's important to adopt them, because there are scholars that have done this all their life, and something to say they have, even if after we criticize. But I think is important that all these things are really at the center of what have been done, and so I think it's important to this division between outcomes and consequences. I think is important. Is a little bit what you were saying, that sometimes an action can have a consequence. It is not exactly the what it was expected, and is a kind of hidden consequence. And I just wanted to add this to the reflection. Yeah, sure.
No, I was just wondering, like, if there was maybe another way of framing your objective, no? Instead of saying I want to study the political impact, it could be something more subtle, no?
Subtle, yeah.
Exactly, subtle. In terms of, I don't know, kind of this small, another word for impact, that small effect, no, that these acts are able to produce in their surroundings.
Or maybe not measurement itself, but the acknowledgement of some consequences. So because, you know, measuring it points towards another direction of probably, I don't know, something, indicators and performances. And maybe I think that if we are talking about this looking to even social practices, maybe just the acknowledgement of those bringing that social practice up, it's itself, I think it's an excellent contribution. So
they invent things, social movements, they invent things, and this is, of course, is a evident outcome, like invent a new form of organization, for instance, and
or so probably not measuring.
Yeah, but I have to say, it's not like I'm thinking very much about the impact. You know, I'm more interested in, you know, in detailing what the relation is. Assuming that the relation, of course, from this point of, from a very basic point of view, I'm not doing it just because I like it from an artistic point of view. Trying to describe a relation implies that the relation is somehow significant for the things that it produces, etc., etc. Clearly, I'm skeptical about the impact, any diagnosis of impact when it's done on a certain scale, or when impact is become closer and closer to the idea of success, because it depends, success for whom and how it's going to last. I don't know. The Russian Revolution, was it successful or not? I don't know. It depends. I suppose if you're judging it in 1922 or in 1934, it's or 39, for God's sake. So it's really tricky. So I'm more interested in describing things because I think that you can learn from observation, and other people can learn, rather because, you know, you assume that these or that specific episode or tool, etc., will produce an impact. Sometimes I just assume that there is some impact, but yes, quantifying that is very tricky.
Just say something about, I think it's very funny when you talk about coletividade, because probably my imaginary of, an architect living in Lisbon since ever, coletividade has a very kind of strong
Meaning.
shape and form, and it's
Okay.
really not the coletividade that's the
umbrella term.
It's funny because I think they
What is the
very,
collectividade for you?
my
Careful, because
idea
this
of
goes in my next
coletividade,
paper, so it's
the idea of the collectividade that were, the old ones that you are talking about. So probably those that are related more even with specific places. So Frank, amigos do Minho, they became popular at the end, but you have all these coletividades de cultura e desporto, so
recreio de esporte.
desporto, those that are part of the confederation.
Yes, yes, yes.
So it's interesting because this is really a new type of coletividade. I don't know, like new social movements, new coletividade. I don't know if it's because they operate in a very different.
Not so much, I think.
They're so different, but that's my again. It's not my field of study.
But for instance, Amigos do Minho, it was a place where one of them, what's the name of this other housing organization that was meeting in Amigos do Minho?
But the
chão alguma coisa.
Lutas do chão, os são lutas, não.
Chãos da luta. It was, and so is also there are some connections also.
But I think that's a very kind of unique.
Yeah.
For all the others, I think there is this distinction between, this older.
But for instance, the role of these places for such civil rights movement was strongly based in the network of Baptist churches and communities. So is the role of these spaces as both physically and like kind of the relations that they allowed and the human resources that I think is very interesting. Yes. So it can be, well, I just jumping in. This is your seminar now. I'm kind of
it's good. It's good. No, I think that probably every definition or taxonomy should be taken in with a pinch of salt, in the sense that even the new, or for example, the no profit. Okay. No profit covers like a huge spectrum of initiatives, and even if you think about the no profit that looks like Sirigaita, there will be, I don't know, Sirigaita, who is, at least now, because it it wasn't like that before, in many ways. Now it's the equivalent of what in Italy would be a centro sociale, very much so. Okay. But also Damus, for example, or all the other clubs, collectividades in the sense of clubs, like the Sterno, Damus, etc., etc. These are no profit, which they belong to the no profit realm and juridical stance. Sometimes in many ways it also fulfill the same purpose, because there are like indie places where the same people would go looking for the same things in large part. They're very different also, because Sirigaita works in a totally different, from the point of view of internal logic and internal management, works very different, I suppose, from Damas or other cooperatives or associations that are in fact like bars and cafes. Okay. So even if you're considering just the new ones, you will find a spectrum of different things, and the old ones is the same. And if you compare the old ones and the new ones, it's get even more complicated. I think that, as always, there is no definitions are not found in nature. Okay, so a definition must be useful for some purpose. And for example, if you consider that the point of view of urban change, which is the original background of all this investigation. Well, Damas and Sirigaita might be different things in many ways, but they participate somehow to the same process. If you look another side of urban change, even the old and the new collectividades, they participate in the same process, in the sense they are being both evicted in quite rapidly from the city center, no? And if you look, so there are commonalities. If you look at the question, the issue from a normative and not only analytical point of view, then it's the matters of definition, of vocabulary, are also creative tools that you can use to assemble coalition, for example. So it's an open question whether Joaquim Escoval of the Confederation of the old collectividades can be a partner or not for the network of collectividades in Luta, which is struggling against the evictions of new and old collectividades. So, the definition of collectividades, in a sense, is also a normative issue.
But I understand maybe
for
there is
me,
a
for
legally,
example, the
there is a legally
definition of
defined.
collectividades come from, the copyright is by Rita Silva. Someday she told me, well, they were discussing that. Well, I suppose that we could call Sirigaita and all the other things, well, collectividades, like they always be. And this as an implicit is not just a matter of definition, but also what kind of role you see for yourself in the city, if you want to link up to a certain tradition or not, and so on and so forth. So it's, as I said in the beginning, it's an analytical, but also a normative problem. Across all the different concepts. And
but I understand what you mean, because there is a legal definition of that you need to open. I think that you go to the local government to say, I want to open a collectividad, and there is a specific framework, a legal framework for that, I think. So, yeah.
no, it's a profit membership-based association.
And
then you
Now
can
that I'm thinking about that, I think it's much more suited to the role of those sport organizations that collective associações. So I think it's much suited to use the collectividade, because at the end of the day, I think obviously it's a very different role from the first collectividades that
And I think that maybe a kind of the Club dos Empresários doesn't want to be called colletividade. Portanto, so I think there is this kind of identity, also meaning in the definition that, as you were saying, like if you are said to be colletividade, it means that you belong to certain. You have some idea of what, because organizational also brings the type of the organization also has a type of values. So is also a message, the type of organization. I think that this is also an aspect that is interesting to address. So you organize in this way, in a collective way, horizontal, because this type of organization embodies the values that you want to diffuse and defend. So I think in the sense,
Just returning to the measurement, I think more than achievement, a political impact in very concrete terms. I think these collectividades, they built that political space within the community. And that is also an achievement. How to acknowledge that practices of creating a political space, a representation, in that sense, more than what they achieved. The end of gentrification, another policy, but they built and they create and they develop this political space.
There's something I'd like to say about this now that we're returning to the topic of like measuring the effects and the outcomes of all of these forms of making politics. I think that really one of the main criticism that I see directed towards, for example, more prefigurative ways of doing politics, such as mutual aid networks and popular canteens, whatever, which is something that I see, for example, a lot of anarchist people that I know doing. They reject to engage with the state. They want to find like more autonomous forms of struggle and political organizing and fixing the problems themselves, rather than asking a state institution to do that. One of the main criticisms is that what they're doing is basically just learning how to manage the resources that they have at their disposal a little bit better, but the resources are still the same. And who controls the resources? Who has access to the most resources? It's still the government, the state institutions, the city council, and the wealthier citizens, the bourgeoisie, so to say, right? So, like, there's not always, with these types of prefigurative politics, there's not always a sense of we're gaining ground, we're gaining more power. We're just learning how to manage a little bit better the resources that we already have before. And I know cases, not specifically in Portugal, but in other countries, I know cases of these type of networks and popular canteens or wherever that work so well that even the city council was like, to the citizens that were in need or couldn't satisfy their basic needs, the city council was like, just go talk to the activists, just go talk to the mutual aid network, to the popular canteen, and they'll help you out. And it was used sort of as an excuse for the state to disinvest and to exclude itself from providing those needs to the people, you know? I see, for example, the same thing happening when it comes to political education, right? If I want to get a political education, I can go to a meeting or a session by one of the organizations in Sirigaita, for example, the Coletivo Marxista Revolucionário, which I think has changed its name, right? But one of the reasons why I might feel that need is
having a party on Friday.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry.
And one of the reasons,
commercial.
but one of the reasons why I might need that is because there was sort of a lack on maybe the school system or the state in providing me opportunities to have that political socialization or education, right? And so a lot of this is just basically filling the gaps for things that could have been made or should have been made by the state. At least that's what I see it. But this is more like a commentary, and I'm not obviously making a case against everyday politics. I think I see both contentious politics and everyday politics as mutually inclusive, not as like things that dichotomies that are set apart. Maybe that's one of the reasons why so many people from Sirigaita are also involved with Abida and Stopped Pages, because there is an overlap between the two. And I also agree with what you said before about how political parties became so more irrelevant in the modern age because they lost that sense of connection with the people that came from everyday politics and all that.
But I'm not sure if prefigurative and everyday are coincident. Actually, I think they are kind of different things.
I have no idea what prefigurative means. Actually.
Is when, for instance, you create a cooperative and you don't want you implement in the daily life in your life the type of rules and organization that you want to see in the future. Maybe.
I think that there is a connection, if you want, in the sense that ordinary politics is basically what I would call a politics of autonomy.
Yeah, we are taking very long.
Yeah, really.
Thank you for joining us all. Thank you.
So yes, there is the idea that almost I could say by definition, everyday politics is about satisfying your needs. Okay, I don't really buy the argument that if you do things by yourself, or if you produce services for free, that is an excuse for the state not to provide the services. I think that the elite do not need that kind of excuse. They will do that anyway. So and I think that this is something that it's. I mean, welfare was cut since the 80s in our society, not because there was an explosion of autonomous initiatives that were providing healthcare, food, or education to the society, so that the state would say, "Oh, well, we could leave this to them." I don't think this is the case. And that's another reason of my skepticism about the impact, because sometimes, and maybe this is a pessimistic perspective, I don't know, you will tell me, but sometimes I think that, well, I'm maybe not being so revolutionary, maybe not significantly impacting the grand scheme of things. My question to an anarchist that says that, or whoever else, would be, well, what are you doing, and anyway, what is the alternatives? I'm pretty much accustomed to losing and being in the minority, and I don't think I have any alternative just to rather than just go on and doing what I think is right. And what I think is right is somewhere in between ordinary and contentious politics somehow, and I think that's the main thing. That's the main thing that I'm interested in. What is the relation between?
If I can see a difference between you, your work is to look for politics in everyday practices, and the prefigurative politics perspective is a little bit the opposite. It's like everyday practices voluntarily transformed into politics. And sometimes what you look in the everyday practice are even like kind of hidden and not intentionally understood as forms of politics, but at the end they have a political impact. The impact in the sense of micro impact.
A value.
Yeah.
A function.
Yeah, function. So I think it's in a certain way they are kind of different things. So because if you look at this kind of mass, like you have the metaphor of the traffic, and I think it's not is a very distant from this idea of prefigurative in a certain way. Like
well, it depends, because I mean.
There is also this one, but there is also much more than that.
Traffic is an example that is it's ordinary politics in automatic mode. Okay.
Yeah.
But the use that ordinary politics can be also used strategically. Okay. Yeah. So no, it's not. I'm not interested in the ultimate, reason why people or institutions would do what they do. I'm more interested in what they do from an empirical point of view. But I think that there is a way to put ordinary politics to the service of contentious politics or representative politics in a strategic way. Okay, without necessarily perverting it. But for example, when I'm saying that parties used to do ordinary politics and should do that more, should engage with that kind of reality and dimension of life, collective life more, I'm saying precisely something like this, that a party should a party or a political subject should be able, if he wants to be complete in the sense and successful in the sense that or to give itself some chances of success, like Lefebvre said, if that political subject doesn't want to slide down into irrelevance and folklore, well, it has to be able to operate in many different spheres. Okay, so even if I'm thinking about personally, my preferences, I'm not an activist in the sense of people in Habitat. Okay, I like Sirigaita as it is, as it was. I like to be on the door and do my stuff. That's my personal preference. But I can clearly see why, for example, in the city of Lisbon, we do need Habitat, okay? And why, if there was a possibility to scale up that into something that starts to become like a municipal ins, for example, I would go for that 100%, because I think that a successful political actor should be able to operate in all these different spheres, and probably others, spheres of imaginary, etc., which is some sort of across, cuts across all these 3 dimensions somehow. It's another important element. How can you be a political actor if you're not able to build your own imaginary of things, your own vision of the future, your own cultural hegemony, if you want, in Gramscian terms. So you need to be able to do that if you want to be successful. So it's very much not a choice between different alternatives, except that in a contingent contingent way, you will have to choose many times between this and that and the other thing, But theoretically, as much as you are able to integrate and build a coherent political project across these different dimensions, the better.
Okay, I think that we had a nice discussion.
Let's ask Joanna what she thinks.
Maybe she's there and already have her glass of wine before dinner while we are still here discussing. But hello.
Enjoying the discussion. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you for staying until now. And well, I hope to see you again here in the seminar. If we discussed things related to also to housing in Lisbon. So if you are interested in this topic, we have had many seminars on this topic and also housing around and other topics too. And well, thank you very much. It was great. Grazie, Marco.
You're welcome.
You will be online